Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching Business Morning. We're coming to you live from Channels Television, broadcasting from Lagos. It's about 30 minutes past the hour of 10. We've been joined in the studio by Toki Mabugunje, an SME consultant. She is on my far left, and to my immediate left is AK Ubiji, who is Executive Secretary at the National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Thank you for coming on the program. We have to take you out of your homes to be here while others are relaxing. But thank you all the same. We're talking about the SME, generally funding especially, which is very critical. I want to start with Toki. You've been dealing with the SMEs for a long time, I believe, and we have right now a lot of efforts by the government to help these businesses to grow by giving them more access. I want to believe more access is the key word here to funding. But how would you assess the efforts so far in this regard?
Well, I think I must, to some extent, commend the more recent interventions by government. There are some new funds that have been released. The Special Assistant to the President on MDGs has a microcredit available for those in the agricultural value chain, as they say, right around the country. And they intend to disburse these funds through the microfinance banks, NGOs, microcredit unions. You have the 220 billion fund for SMEs, which has also been announced and launched by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So yes, something is being done. But we still have to look at the fact that we're a huge country of 170 million people. We have a huge informal base. And so the number of SMEs is large. And so although things are being done, it's not enough. For me, the big gap is in how the commercial banks themselves step up to the plate and how they provide access to credit for SMEs. If we have the banks themselves also taking part in the development of our economy, our SMEs will go places. You know, so right now we still have all these special funds that can only go so far. But if we have the entire financial framework being a part of this effort, much more will be accomplished.
Okay, your take before I go into the issue of commercial banks. I know that's a very big issue right now, but let me hear you. What's your own viewpoint as to access to funding for SMEs in Nigeria?
Yeah, let me just go straight to that point. Access to funding to SMEs in Nigeria has been a huge challenge. Though the government is making some effort, as Madam rightly noted. Government on its side is making some efforts, maybe because they've seen that huge challenges exist in that sector. So that's why you have this 220 billion that came up to address even a lot of the informal sector. Look at women that that's located, the women that are located 60% of that, the 220 billion. That's a very good gesture. But in addition, let us, I don't want to harp so much on what the government have done. There's some effort. And as Madam rightly noted also, the commercial banks, they are not really, you know, coming up the way expected of them in this economy. If they play their role as expected, things really move. But still, there are also other funds available. I don't know if you've been following up in recent times, even from foreign governments. The Dutch government has set up a 700 million euros or something like that for SME development in Nigeria. 700 million euros. This thing was announced last year. They will follow it up, just not up to a month now. We learned that the Dutch government changed their mind and directed the money to the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment for them to get a consortium of banks to handle. You understand? They've not started disbursing it yet. They've not started that yet. So they are now working on getting a consortium of banks to handle it. So these are the other opportunities coming even from foreign governments to assist SME development in the country. We should utilize these opportunities very, very well. so that those that really need it will get it, and then our economy will blossom.
Okay, Toki, let me get back to you. You talked about the issue of commercial banks being involved in lending, and that has been an issue, a very difficult one for a long time, especially to SMEs. One of the things that have been pointed out about the involvement of commercial banks in lending, it has to do with the interest rates. The interest rate is one that many SMEs may not be able to bear, may not be able to pay as much as 20%, 23%, 25%. So there's always an attention being shifted to the big players in the economy, all in the bid to ensure that they get back. And that's one. Another issue has to do with the various issues, the regulatory framework of the central bank. Many of those bankers are of the view that their cash reserve is being streamlined. You can't really have much access to a lot of money as you would before now. So how do you think that this would work out, having to see how they can help SMEs in Nigeria?
Yes, on the side of the banks themselves, as you rightly pointed out, there's the issue of high interest rates. There's the issue of having more of short-term funds available in the economy than long-term, so it's difficult to invest long-term. But we also have this critical issue of identification and verification of borrowers, and which is why the central bank a few years ago licensed some credit bureaus, right? Now we have a situation where even where the bank is being genuine in its efforts and it wants to lend to a borrower, being able to assess that borrower in the shortest possible time to tell whether he or she is a good or bad borrower is critical to the issue of access to credit. So I was involved actually in an advocacy visit to Central Bank just a month or so ago with a group. And it was explained to us by the deputy governor of the bank at the time. And she said that there is a critical balance that has to be maintained between the exchange rate for the naira and the issue of interest. Right? Because you do not want a situation where the Nigerian economy is not interesting to those who want to invest. So there's this tight balance that the central bank is trying to maintain. But to my view, over and above that is the wide gap between the rate at which the banks get the money and the rate at which they lend. It is too much. Some actually have about 10% over and above what was borrowed. So we find central bank doing things like in the SME fund, the 220 million we're talking about, billion we're talking about, they will be lending round about 6% to the banks.
Okay.
Right? No, to the banks. They have put a ceiling that it cannot be lent at more than 9%. Because their fear is that if you leave it open, it will go into 2 digits. So that's part of the issue as well, the way in which the banks are leveraging on these things and making their money. The issue of the use of credit bureaus, a lot more needs to be done about that. We have about 3 of them now operational. We must get the banks to use the services of these credit bureaus.
Are SMEs really getting involved in credit bureaus? Are they having any registration of SMEs?
It is the financial institution that needs to register its customers. And then other financial institutions can check on the credit history of those customers. So we need to get them to use those institutions more. These are some of the frameworks that exist in the developed world, in the Western world, that helps with the credit system.
Okay.
So our credit system needs to be more robust, right? So it is easier, 1, for the banks to lend, and 2, for the SME to build good credit history that's on record, that everybody can check.